true. I want to be a voice for Zion, to guide, to build and change the world while I am in my youth.
Welcome into another Key Idiot podcast. As you can see, I'm not wearing my black shirt and my black slacks. That's right. I am sloughing Elder's Quorum. Sorry, President Gertz, but I had to do it because today we have a guest that I've been trying to get a hold of for 3 years. When I got out of prison, I had studied the Book of Enoch extensively. I had read every translation out there. And so when I was searching, I found a guy that is a genius as it relates to the Book of Enoch. And so I'm excited to have him on. I'm joined by Trevor the Key Keys and David the Lion Douglas. And of course, you all know him because we get comments every day. Trev, every day?
It's the number one person that's ever been requested, not every day, but the number one person by 15x that people are like, you guys need to talk to Michael B. Rush. You guys heard of Michael B. Rush? Michael B. Rush. I'm just like, who's this Michael B. Rush guy? I ran out, bought his book, listened to it in 3 days. And this is, Mike, you know how long that takes to listen to in 3 days? Like, it's a lot of content, and I'm now on round 2, and I'm smiling as giddy as I can. I'm a major fanboy. So, yeah, very excited.
So we're joined, like I said, Michael B. Rush, and I'd rather meet with Michael B. Rush than Michael B. Jordan. Like, that's where I'm at. Michael.
Oh, wow.
We want to jump right into it. Do you go by Michael? Do you go by Michael B. Rush? Do you go by Brother Rush? Like, what do you go for?
You know, I'm one of 5 boys, and my brothers called me everything under the sun. So, yeah, you can call me, whatever you want. I'm not real particular about it.
I'm going to call you Michael because it's such a powerful name. It's the name of an archangel. I love Michael. Trevor's name's actually Michael. His middle name, his dad's Michael. So I'm going to call you Michael. Tell us a little bit, before we dive into your stuff, I don't know a lot of your backstory. I know you're an accountant or a CPA or something like that, but tell us a little bit about who you are, where you grew up, your relationship to the church. Did you follow the typical Mormon path? And then how did you get into this deep doctrine, esoteric, Hugh Nibley type stuff?
Sure. So I consider myself to be a pretty normal guy. I have moved around a lot. I went pretty much to a different elementary school every year. So I have traveled around. I've lived in every time zone in the country. But I grew up out west. Mostly between Utah and California, Central Coast, California, around Pismo Beach, Arroyo Grande, San Luis Obispo. That's a wonderful area. I spent, probably more time in that area than in any one other space, just because, my dad did a lot of construction, and we would move and live in the houses that he was building. Wasn't a military thing, but I've always been interested. To BYU, I went on a mission to Chile, southern Chile. At the time, my mission went from Temuco to Punta Arenas, which is about the 1,000-mile section of that ends at the southern tip of Chile.
Is that all the way down by Patagonia?
Yes, Patagonia was in my mission. I saw that with my eyes flying over it to Punta Arenas. I served in Coyhaique, which is a town in the Andes. Of course, Chile is very skinny. The widest part of my mission was about 50 miles, so you could always see the ocean and you could always see the Andes. It was just drop dead gorgeous down there. Had an incredible time there. Then I came back and went to BYU, where I graduated with a degree in accounting and information systems. Then I started my career out in San Francisco, working for Ernst & Young. And then after a while, as everyone, does, uh, it was actually my wife. She said, listen, I'm done with you working for Ernst& Young. I've posted your resume on Monster, and, I was always traveling, and, public accounting is very demanding, very long hours, particularly in the Bay Area, where during that time, it was, people were going public all the time, and it was, it was a great, great experience, but not real conducive to being a young husband and father. So I went to work out in the Modesto area, and I worked there for another 5 years or so, and then we moved to Utah, where I worked for Nucor Steel. And I was a VP of finance for Nucor Steel's recycling division in the Western United States. And then I started my own company. And, that ultimately brought me out to the South. And I've been here ever since and love it.
Which part of the South?
So I've lived in Tennessee. I currently live in North Carolina.
Which city in North Carolina?
So Davidson, it's about 40.
I know Davidson.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Davidson College is here. It's a great town.
Yeah.
That
Is
in
that where
fact,
Steph Curry went, or one of the Curry boys?
yes.
went? Okay.
Yeah, they're actually naming my freeway exit, renaming it to Steph Curry. So there is it's either a Prime or a Netflix movie called The Other Zoe. It's filmed in Davidson,
Okay.
which is where I live. I have 6 kids there. I've got one. My youngest daughter is about to go on a mission. She starts home MTC later this month. Then I will have 2 boys, a 17-year-old boy and a 13-year-old son, who will still be with us, and we're having an awesome time here. So that's kind of the background, from professional. I am involved in private equity. I'm the CFO of the nation's largest manufacturer of air filtration and nonwoven products, and that's a lot of fun. It keeps me busy. But ever since I was a kid, I have always been fascinated by ancient documents. And really the reason, for that is, one time I was, reading the Book of Mormon, and it's that, it's a passage that we think about often as missionaries, where it says a Bible, we have a Bible, we need no more Bible. Well, when you're reading that, the Lord tells Nephi, says, listen, I have spoken to all of the nations of the earth, and they have written my words. And that really struck me profoundly, even as a teenager. I said, if the Lord has spoken to all nations, and they have written his words, then I want to read those words.
Right.
And so I started to, read, ancient, documents. And, I've come across some real treasures. Probably my favorite is the Book of Enoch, which, I'm currently wrapping up the 3rd volume of that series. And my commentary on that book is going to be about 1,200 pages or more. It's just an incredible, book that it's mentioned in the Doctrine and Covenants in section, I believe, 107, verse 57. Yeah.
Yes, 157.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, as far as ancient documents go, ancient texts, I mean, it was a lost book for a long time. So
Just so you know, I think you're part of the fulfillment of DNC 10757. So when I got out of prison, and I got a crazy story, I spent 5 years in prison. I used to be a super wealthy guy. They call me the Mormon Wolf of Wall Street, but it was great. I read a ton of books. And when I got out, I started Googling all my ideas that I derived from studying Enoch, and your name came up. So I bought all your stuff. And I believe, this is just my opinion, this is out of the Book of Shane, so take it for what it's worth. But I believe you're part of the fulfillment of the prophecy of DNC 107:57.
Well, that's interesting. As I was going through the latter chapters of the Book of Enoch, Enoch actually, he's talking about mysteries, and he sees that in the last days there are going to be many dark mysteries that are revealed. And he says, but I know another mystery. He says that in the last days my words will be translated with exactness and received by the righteous with joy. And I think that is so cool to be part of that, to help people realize how awesome the Book of Enoch actually is, and how perfectly it meshes with the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. And not only that, but it clearly indicates, to me anyway, that there was once an original truth. The gospel did not begin with Abraham. I mean, the early patriarchs, when you read in the book of Abraham, he comes out and says, listen, the Lord preserved the writings of my fathers in my hands. And, I've studied them. So his motivation for entering into this covenant relationship with God came from his studying the writings of the fathers that the Lord had preserved into his own hands. And I believe that the Book of Enoch is an incredible example of just that.
Can you give us a synopsis of, you tell a parable in the very beginning about the kingdom and the king and the hidden eggs?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Can you
Yes, I do.
synopsis of that?
Well, the purpose of that, my own little parable there is, there are lots of levels to the gospel. And to some people, the gospel means one thing. And to another person who has diligently dedicated time and effort to studying the gospel, it can mean something more. And it's kind of like the layers of an onion. And what I wanted to portray in that little parable was that these profound truths are kind of like these hidden gems. And some people will search for those and some people won't. And because some people don't search for them, they were these eggs, I called them. And some of these eggs began to, stink.
Oh, rotten. Yeah.
Yeah. And people, because they didn't understand what it was, they rejected those things. And I think that there are some things in the gospel that people don't understand. They haven't paid the price to understand them. And so because of that, either their testimonies are weak or built on sandy foundations, built upon the teachings of other people rather than going deep into the roots of the gospel themselves, or they become offended by these mysteries that they don't understand and they leave it all together. And there's more that we could talk about in there, but that was essentially what I was trying to convey, that the gospel is incredible, and you really get into it what you invest. I mean, if you don't, as the Mormon Wolf of Wall Street, all about returns, right? I mean, if it doesn't take an incredible investment to result in a huge fortune, as long as you have time and consistency, you can turn small returns into large returns over time. And that's what I was trying to get at with this parable, is there's more to this, but you get what you invest into it.
Totally. So jumping into the Book of Enoch, there's multiple translations.
Mhm.
And I'd like to get from you the one you found the most fruitful, and then how you've incorporated the Dead Sea Scrolls and the information in that into your study of the Book of Enoch.
Yeah. So, there are lots of translations of the Book of Enoch. Though my go-to translator of ancient documents, I think that he does an incredible job, and he was just incredibly, gifted.
Can,
I think.
can I guess? Can I guess which one it is?
Sure,
I'm going to guess Charles.
correct. Yeah, R. Charles
That's
was,
my favorite too.
incredible. So he took every existing copy of the Book of Enoch that he could find, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and laid them out and just analyzed every version and came up with his copy based off of that. And not only the Ethiopian translations, but also any other fragments that he could get his hands on to. So as far as English goes, it is far and away the best translation that we have. That being said, I think that there is great benefit in looking at other translations as well. One of my favorite resources when I'm looking into biblical passages is Bible Hub. It's an online website that shows dozens and dozens of translations, and it's very beneficial to me to see how different scholars have taken these words and interpret them differently. I think there's insight in it.
Let me ask another question, because I'm steeped in the LDS tradition. Listen, I grew up in Utah, followed the Mormon map, went on the mission, all of it until I went to prison. That wasn't on the Mormon map, but we're steeped in these traditions, and for whatever reason, we think that anything that is new or truthful or anything has to come from the one who's got the keys. It's the keys, it's the keys, it's the keys. Yet the Dead Sea Scrolls did not come from our church. So how do people deal with, especially members of the church, if something does come out, like let's say we don't find it and somebody else does? And then we're talking to a lot of different Indian chiefs, and this one Indian chief has these birch bark scrolls that come from the Book of Mormon. It hasn't been translated, but how is that going to go down if it doesn't come from, our top leaders, and we get somebody else out there that's saying, hey, we got this record. It actually corroborates the record you guys have. How is it as a member of the church? How should we manage that or deal with that?
This is a great question, and I think that it's one that we need to spend more time pondering on. So a lot of people are under the impression that the prophet is going to do all of the lifting for them. And this is an interesting idea, and I believe that it's a false idea. You have an example in the Old Testament, which happened very shortly after the house of Israel crosses the Red Sea. The Lord comes to Moses and says, Moses, gather the people at the base of Mount Horeb. I am going to come and I'm going to talk to them directly, and they will know that I am their God and that they are my people. So Moses tells the people, sanctify yourselves. The Lord's coming in 3 days. He's going to talk to you directly. And so the people sanctify themselves. They gather around, the base of Mount Horeb. According to the book of Numbers, there's some 600,000 men. So there's women and children on top of this. This is a huge host. And then the mountain starts to shake and tremble, and smoke begins to come out of the seams of the rocks. And this dark cloud comes over the peak of the mountain, and they start to hear these trumpets blasting. And the people go, holy cow, I'm out of here. And they start running to the opposite side of the valley. And Moses goes, guys, whoa, what are you doing? The Lord wants to talk to you. And this is a pivotal moment in the history of Israel. They go, Moses, nuts to this. You talk to the Lord. for us. You tell us what he says. If we hear his voice, we will die. And so the scriptures say that Moses went up into the mountain and the people went to the far side of the valley. So here you have an example of the people putting their own spiritual education on the shoulders of Moses, where it was clear that the Lord wanted that relationship to be one-on-one with his people. That is the kind of God. He has the capabilities of doing that. Just read Jeremiah chapter 31. He says, in the last days, he's going to make a new covenant. And it will no more be said that every man should go out and say to his neighbor and say, know ye the Lord, for all men will know me from the greatest to the least. The Lord wants to communicate with us. And if you search with those kinds of eyes into our scriptures, you'll see, invitations throughout the text, such as, ask and ye shall receive, knock and it shall be opened, unto you. If any of you lack wisdom, let them ask of God. And there's these incredible invitations, but despite those invitations, and despite, the opening verse to the Book of Mormon, where Nephi says, listen, guys, I was born of goodly parents. They taught me somewhat, my father taught me somewhat after the things that he knew, but he had obtained great knowledge in the mysteries of God. How did he do that if Lehi only taught him somewhat after all of his learnings? There were some things that Lehi did not feel that he could teach Nephi, that Nephi needed to learn from the Lord. And thank goodness that Nephi took that approach. And it's clear, if you read the words of Nephi, he was trying to get us to understand the scriptures from this context. I mean, just read in, 1 Nephi chapter 10. It's one of my favorite invitations from Nephi when he says, listen, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if he will answer me, he will answer you. You need to go, to the Lord and work with him, and he will open your eyes just as he has opened mine. But then you have Laman and Lemuel, who they wanted dad to do everything. And if they had a question, they would wait for dad to tell them. Or they'd go to Nephi and say, hey, what does this mean? And Nephi said, have you asked the Lord? Of course not. He doesn't tell me that. I'm a bozo. He only talks to dad. Unfortunately, there are many people in the church that believe that have that perspective on the gospel, that if there is something important to know, that the prophet will tell them that. Meanwhile, if you look at what the invitations that the prophet has extended to us, he has incredible invitations to us, right? Like he says, he invites us, he says, listen, you need to do the spiritual work necessary to receive the revelations that will be required to help you to save yourselves and your families. And if you don't do that, then, it's not my responsibility to teach you those things. It's your responsibility to learn those things. You need to hear the Lord in your personal life. He's given us all kinds of invitations like that. What President Nelson rarely does is expound these incredible doctrines and tell us all the things that we're supposed to know about them. He gives us these invitations, and it's up to us to act on them. I mean, he's given incredible invitations to us.
Have you always been into the mysteries? For those people who have maybe been drinking milk and they're saying, hey, I'm kind of ready for some meat here. I'm kind of ready to go and buy me, Michael Rush's book here on the Book of Enoch. And I'm ready to go maybe read the Book of Enoch. I've read the Book of Mormon several times. What was the process for you? I mean, have you always been this, I meet some people and they're like, yeah, I was reading the Book of Enoch when I was 13 years old, that certainly wasn't me. But what was the process for you as you went through and started desiring to feast upon the word and understand the mysteries like Nephi?
Well, let's talk about the word mysteries for a second, okay? Because there's a stigma on this word. People hear the word mysteries and they think, oh, great, you're going down those paths into the mist of darkness, and you're going to get lost, right? That's what so many people think
Dog.
about.
So many. Yeah.
Which is what Satan would do, right? If I were Satan, that's what I'd have you think. I don't want you to know the mysteries, so I'm going to make it scary and spooky.
Now, I'm going to talk about this from the context of the Book of Enoch, okay? So in the Book of Enoch, there's this mysterious group referred to as the Watchers, and they reveal this science and these mysteries to the posterity of Adam that causes them to become corrupted. And Enoch learns that these mysteries that these Watchers have been teaching the sons of Adam are worthless mysteries. And the Lord teaches Enoch the mysteries that can help to save him. So when Nephi is talking about obtaining a knowledge of the mysteries of God, he's not talking about how God taught him the rotational cycle of Kolob. He's talking about things that have a intimate and immediate impact on Nephi's or Enoch's or mine or yours relationship with God the Father, and how that impacts mortality or the eternity, I should say. And I think that it's very important for people to understand that the greatest mystery that the Old Testament holds was that God the Father sent his only begotten Son to atone for the sins of the world. That is embedded throughout the Old Testament text, but it was a mystery. And there were prophets that clearly talked about these things, but people had to dig into their words in order to really learn and to grow and to develop. It's clear from Nephi's teachings that there were people that when they looked at the brass serpent on the pole, they didn't get it. But there were other people that came away from that experience with a deeper comprehension. And you look at the Book of Mormon prophets compared to, say, the prophets in or compare them to, say, the Sadducees and the Pharisees. There's a world of difference in comprehension there. And it isn't because the Pharisees and the Sadducees could not understand these things. It's that they would not understand these things. And if you want to understand these things and they're vital to you, then you need to go through the channels that the Lord has established. And his primary means of teaching his children is and always has been through the medium of the Holy Ghost. There were many Jewish people who heard Christ's teachings, saw him perform miracles, and they were pricked in their hearts, and they knew that there was something special about this man from Nazareth. And they had a decision to make. They had to choose to act on what they were feeling in their hearts, or go to their rabbis and have their rabbis tell them what they should think about this man. If they chose the latter, they did not follow Jesus Christ. Now think about that.
Yeah, it's a little foreshadowing. Little foreshadowing.
Do you think where Nicodemus was? Like, on one hand, he's like, man, I'm feeling something. But when I go talk to my compadres here, I'm feeling something different.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, but look at the gospel throughout the recorded history that we can study. When has accepting the gospel ever been easy? Okay, for the early Christians, they were Jews, right? For the early Jews to adopt and become disciples of Christ, they were cast out of the synagogues and persecuted. Okay, they became pariahs in their communities. Think about the early days of the restored gospel. Our forefathers who accepted these truths also became social pariahs. They were driven from, place to place as a result of this. Ask yourself, why? There's a pattern here. If the Lord wanted to make these things easy, he definitely could have done so.
Yeah.
He could have used, Caiaphas to announce the coming of Jesus Christ instead of the wild men in the wilderness.
It's a great point. If Caiaphas would have done it, it would have been easy, but he didn't. And so, I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but as I read about the past, I think it teaches me about the future. So I'm like, if I want to know the future, then I just need to study the past because history seems to repeat itself.
It does.
Okay. So
I got a question on this. So there's a lot going on right now, which is pretty exciting. Like on LDS podcast, Dave Butler's leading the charge. I don't know if you follow him, Michael, but he's talking about these Deuteronomist reforms. And I've always understood, and going on my mission, I went down to Peru, very, very Catholic, and we taught about, all of the changes that were made at the Council of Nicaea and the further councils, right? And so I had this impression, Catholic Church, turned some knobs, made some changes to fit according to their doctrine, right? But I never once had considered that possibly the Jews did the same thing with the Old Testament, right? And now all of these people are coming out, not just LDS, saying that there was major Deuteronomist reforms done where they went through and scrubbed out the Son of Man. They scrubbed out the Son of God, right? And the beautiful part about Enoch is, I think Enoch, if I'm correct, it talks about the Son of Man more than anyone combined, right?
Yeah, it's the oldest document to talk about the Son of Man, and it does so pervasively.
Oldest document. And then you look at, you were talking about Nephi, and they had a very early record in these brass plates, right? These guys came over with the knowledge before it got scrubbed, before King Josiah. And so, they had this knowledge and they were able to build their faith and their understandings on this. And, the cool thing about the Book of Enoch coming out as late as it did and being hidden was it didn't have the chance to go through that scrubbing.
Yeah, and this gets, back to the idea of this original ancient tradition that existed in antiquity. And you look at the oldest religions of the world. I'm talking the religion of the Canaanites, the Sumerians, the Babylonians. All of these were based upon the idea that there was a God who had a son. And I mean, whether that was in the Canaanite religion, you had Elohim and Baal, which simply means the Lord. In the Babylonian tradition, you have Ea, which sounds an awful lot like El, and his firstborn son, who becomes the supreme deity and savior of the people. There was this belief in, polytheism that was definitely scrubbed out of Judaism because it was so easy for the Jews and the house of Israel in general to go back and forth between the gospel as they understood it and the gospel of the Canaanites, whose lands they inherited, because the Canaanites worshiped Elohim and the Lord. But they also had all of these other apostate traditions, such as the worship of Heavenly Mother or Asherah, which was pervasive throughout the Canaanites and all of the ancient worlds, whether they called her Asherah or Ayana or Ishtar. It's the same concept. And it was really the worship of Heavenly Mother that brought down the northern kingdom of Israel, and also.
And when you say Heavenly Mother, you're just talking about a goddess, some kind of a goddess, not necessarily, let's call it Elohim's wife, but
correct.
Some of the goddess, they had these goddesses that they worshiped.
And I want to put a pin in this and come back and talk about the lady. It's one of the big sections that I want to talk about here. So we'll come back and talk about.
Yeah, this mother goddess plays a enormous role in the ancient religions of the world, but not in the way that you would imagine. Okay, so this is. I mean, she's often referred to as the Queen of Heaven. The Catholics' veneration of Mary is 100% a relic of the ancient world seeping its way into Catholicism. Nowhere in the scriptures, does it ever suggest that we should venerate or pray to Jesus's mother. This is a relic from the ancient world. It had creeped into the Greek traditions, the Roman traditions, the Babylonian traditions, the Assyrian traditions, the Sumerian traditions, and the Canaanite traditions. So if you read in the book of Jeremiah, he specifically calls out the fact that the northern kingdom was destroyed for worshiping the Queen of Heaven, and that the Jews were destroyed for that same reason. So you come out of Babylon, and now the Jews are hypersensitive to this, and they scrub polytheism from their records. And so we lose a lot of that. They were
when you say polytheism, you're talking about multiple gods, right?
Correct.
So I have a question on that, and I'm so glad I get to talk to you. So I've studied the Book of Enoch. I'm going to ask you a question because you know the Book of Enoch probably better than anybody, in my opinion, on planet Earth right now. If I had to say who is an expert in this, I bet you've spent, how many hours do you think you've spent on the Book of Enoch? I mean, to write a book like this, do you think it's been 10,000 hours?
I have spent a lot. I couldn't tell you how many hours, but one thing that I will tell you, I think that it is impossible to understand the Book of Enoch without the restored,
Agreed.
light of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It would be incomprehensible without.
Okay, so here's my question. So Enoch lived at what time period? Around 35.
So Enoch was alive when Adam was alive. They knew each other. In fact, in Doctrine and Covenants 107, it's talking about them being together.
So I'm going to ask a question. Did Enoch see God face to face?
Yeah.
No question, right? We have Moses 7 says he did. You could say Genesis 5:24, it says he walked with God, and somebody, but the restored gospel lets you know that yes, he walked and talked with God as face to face around the time of Adam. So then I'm reading in Ether the other day. This is about 3 months ago. I'm in Ether chapter 3. And it's always been my opinion that Enoch was talking to Jehovah, right? The God of the Old Testament. In my mind, that's the God he was talking to. Am I on the right track here?
Yeah, that's usually the case.
Okay. And it's been my opinion, because I've grown up in the church, that Jehovah is Jesus Christ, right?
Correct, yeah.
And then I read Ether chapter 3. I'm just going to read it because I want you to help me with this, because I've been really going over this. Ether chapter 3, verse 12. I love this because it says God can't lie first before he goes and says this. Verse 12 says, and he answered, yea, Lord. This is when the brother of Jared has seen the finger of God. Just to put it in context, this is Ether chapter 3, verse 12. And it says, and he answered, yea, Lord, I know that thou speakest the truth, for thou art a God of truth and canst not lie. So we know God can't lie. He says, and when he had said these words, behold, the Lord showed himself unto him. Now I'm going to skip down to verse 14, and this is where he calls himself Jesus Christ in verse 14. And verse 15, it says, and never have I showed myself unto man whom I have created. And so for me, I'm like, but Enoch saw him and talked to him face to face. And then this instance, Jesus Christ says this is the first time he showed himself to the brother of Jared, which was living at the time of the Tower of Babel. So this is something that I have a photographic memory, so I remember when I read one thing and then I'm trying to piece it all together. And then I'm going to DNC 121, verse 28.
Well, hold on. Before you do that, look at verse 16, though. Okay. It says, behold, this body, which ye now behold, is the body of my spirit. So, this gets to a very interesting concept that most people don't spend too much time thinking about. Shane, what did your spirit look like?
I assume it looks like this, just in
Why?
spirit form.
Why would you assume that? That your body, do you look like your dad or your mom?
Absolutely. I look like my dad. Yeah.
Okay. So is your dad's, you look like what you do because of your parents' DNA, right?
Right.
So you have different heavenly parents. Okay. So your spirit would have, mirrored their spiritual DNA.
Okay.
So you lived as a spirit being, not for dozens, not for decades, but for millennia. Okay.
For a long eternities upon eternities, right?
So for a very, very long time. I mean, Bruce R. McConkie said that the plan of salvation, according to this temporal earth, lasts 7,000 years according to men, but that the entire cycle of salvation lasts 7,000 years according to the timing of God. So if one day
That's
God was 1,000 years past.
Say that again. I hope people just picked up on what you
that's
just
cool. I never heard that.
Yeah. So Bruce R. McConkie says that the entire cycle of salvation, because this repeats, over and over.
through all generations.
This isn't the first time it's
heard
happened.
that phrase before.
Well, what was that?
Through all generations of time, have we heard that phrase before?
Yeah, exactly. So if this is true, and Bruce R. McConkie says one day for the Lord is 1,000 years for man. So if the entire cycle takes 7,000 years according to God's time, it takes about 2.6 billion years to complete a cycle. So if we are products, children of this cycle, we have been alive for a very, very long time. And we grew. I mean, if you read in the book of Alma, I think it's 13, it's talking about how it's not happenstance that we're here on this earth. We're here because of who we were before we came, and how we exercised our faith in the pre-existence. And essentially, the book of Abraham says the same thing, that there were noble and great ones.
Right.
Well,
how do you become noble and great?
Well, I think that, essentially, and I refer to this concept just so that we can wrap our minds around it, as the children of heaven, right? So there are worlds without number, and there's people on them. Just read the chapter heading of Moses chapter 1. This is definitely what it means, okay? So there are inhabited worlds. When you read in Moses chapter 7, Enoch uses inhabited worlds as his unit of measure when he's seeing the Lord weeping, it says, how can you weep when if you take this world and blast it down into its particles, and if you could number those particles, and then a million other earths like it would not be the beginning of the number of your creations. So we have an innumerable, unfathomable quantity of children of heaven, okay, that have grown to spiritual maturity before they participated into the Father's plan of salvation, which gives them the opportunity to become like their heavenly parents. Now, the Book of Enoch explores this in all kinds of fascinating.
I'm so glad you're going here because I have like some serious questions I want to ask. Now that I got you like on screen, I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. So in the pre-existence, and we know that people had names in the pre-existence. We know Michael was Adam.
Sure.
We know Gabriel was Noah, right? I mean, through the restored gospel. So we have these 7 archangels, and they are talked about a lot. Not just the 7. I'm talking about the Watchers and Azazel and Semjaza, you name it. Like there's a whole list of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you, and you can say I don't know, or you can say this is what I think. But we have the 7 archangels. So I want to ask you. We know Michael's Adam. We know Gabriel is Noah. Who's Raphael?
We don't know. We simply do not know. We do know that he was present and involved in the events of the restoration because he is named as being there, but we don't know who he is.
Come on, Michael, give me a. What about Uriel? Is it Peter?
you know, I don't know. I don't know who these
What about
people
Phanuel?
were.
If you had to guess a Phanuel and you had to pick a dispensational head, who's Phanuel?
Phanuel, I would say the name Phanuel means face of God. And from the context of the Book of Enoch, Phanuel held the keys of repentance and exaltation, right? So who does that sound like to you? And Phanuel also in the Book of Enoch prohibited the Satans from coming and accusing, and it's interesting, the Satans. In the Book of Revelation, in chapter 12, it refers to Lucifer as accusing his brethren night and day before the throne of God. In the Book of Enoch, Phanuel prohibits the Satans from accusing the children of heaven before his Father's throne. Okay? In other words, Phanuel will be their advocate. So
You're using the term advocate. I'm hearing Jesus. Am I picking up what you're laying down?
I believe that Phanuel is Jesus Christ. Yeah, he was known by, isn't it a fact that President Nelson said, listen, the church needs to study the names of Christ.
Yeah.
And he talks about when he did that study, he was blown away by it. Okay. So this is actually one of the chapters that I'm most excited about in the 3rd volume of the Book of Enoch. It's where it goes through these ancient titles for the Son of God, and they're just...
You just blew my mind on this Phanuel thing, just so you know. You just absolutely blew my mind on this Phanuel thing. You have no idea what you've done to me right now. So thank you for that. So as we explore Phanuel a little bit, why I saw you get like, as soon as I said the name Phanuel, and that's not a very common name, especially in Latter-day Saints.
No, I think it's only mentioned the once in the Book of Enoch.
Now there is what's interesting, did you know in Luke chapter 2, the name Phanuel is mentioned?
No. What's the context in that it's mentioned?
No, either. And I swear I jumped timelines. And I'm like, Phanuel's not mentioned anywhere in the New Testament. Luke chapter 2, Trevor, if you could have GPT pull that up. This is the context that it's in. It's about the prophetess Anna. But Phanuel became, like when I did my study of the book.
What scripture? 2 what?
I don't know. Just ask ChatGPT. Phanuel in the New Testament. He's a chat, just so you know, and for everybody out there, Trevor is our ChatGPT wizard. He's named his ChatGPT Gaz. He knows how, so I should have just said ask Gaz, because he would have known what I was saying.
Verse 36.
2:36. What does it say?
And there was one Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel.
The daughter of Phanuel. That's So that's the only, I missed that part in the New Testament, but I'm telling you, when I read about Phanuel in the Book of Enoch in my studies, like when I got out of prison, I Googled two things very first. I Googled Phanuel, and I Googled to go no more out LDS. Those were the two things that I wanted an answer of, those two things. So in the Book of Enoch just caused me to think about that. And so I'm curious, can you give me any more insights or thoughts that you've had as you've invested so much time studying about Phanuel as one of those archangels?
Yeah, that's Phanuel, in my opinion, is the Son of Man. And I've titled my second volume of the Book of Enoch series, Son of Man, just because of how incredibly awesome he is, and how much Enoch was able to talk about his life and mission in the context of the Son of Man, and how when Christ came to the Jews, there was one title that he referred to himself above all others, and that was Son of Man. I mean, it's you go through the New Testament, it's almost 100 instances when he refers to himself as Son of Man. Now, if you are a Jew and you are hearing this title and you're curious about where this comes from, you're either going to go to the book of Ezekiel or the book of Daniel or the book of Enoch, which was commonplace in Jesus's day. We know that it was commonplace because we have many copies of the book of Enoch amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls that date back to 300 BC. So they had this. So anyone who heard Christ refer to himself as the Son of Man was thinking the Messiah. This man is claiming to be the Messiah, the Son of God. So that knowledge comes from the book of Enoch and no other place, really. When Daniel uses that phrase, the Son of Man, he saw one like unto the Son of Man descending in the clouds of heaven. He's likening that to what the book of Enoch talks about, which mentions that the Son of Man will descend in the clouds of heaven. So Daniel knew that. The ancient world totally was familiar with the book of Enoch. And you can see the fingerprints of the book of Enoch throughout the ancient text. You mentioned Azazel, which,
Oh, did I say
on the Day of Atonement,
I'm like, Azazel. But how did I say it?
I have no idea. We could both be, fluttering. But I say Azazel.
I say Azazel. I say Azazel, so there's three now.
Okay. Well, regardless. So Azazel it is the name that the Jews use for scapegoat, because Azazel was the watcher from the book of Enoch who, proliferated all of this forbidden knowledge. I mean, the posterity of Adam, they were largely agrarian at the time that the watchers came, which is mentioned in, Genesis chapter 6.
Okay, you just said a word I don't know. I'm a dumb guy. What does agrarian mean?
An agricultural-based society, right?
Limited technology.
Yeah. So, agricultural-based, if anyone knows a farmer who's dependent upon the weather for their living, you know that they are men of faith, right? So it was easy for the posterity of Adam to believe in God because their livelihoods were dependent upon the Lord. Because, they had to go out to the field and, pick their food. And when the watchers came, Enoch says that they introduced knowledge that revolutionized Adam's posterity in incredibly short order. And they start doing metallurgy, they start, applying makeup, they start, learning all of these, sciences. And they're no longer dependent upon the Lord as they used to be. And
And Michael, is this,
Azazel,
I can't remember if you talked about this in your book. Is this Prometheus? Is this the Prometheus story?
well, there are lots of types of this kind of story, but I think that the Book of Enoch is the purest version of this, right? I mean, throughout the Sumerian writings and tablets, you have stories about these men that came down from heaven and introduced governance. And I mean, you want to have your mind blown, just start studying the ancient civilization of Sumer. Okay.
I've read all the Anunnaki stuff, Zechariah Sitchin.
All of Sitchin's work.
Yeah, I've read. I don't even want to talk about this for like LDS people because they're like, they don't even know what the word Anunnaki is. And I didn't know what it was until I went to prison and I was the librarian. Okay. So I read 20 to 25 books a month in there. So, and I'm talking to all the other inmates as they're reading stuff to try and figure out, hey, what's interesting, what's good. And so I don't know if Sitchin's is right. I don't know if that's a real thing, but I would love to get, if you're willing to talk about Anunnaki and figure out how that dovetails with Enoch and the restored gospel, that would blow my mind. We could almost do a whole nother episode on that.
So, Anunnaki just simply means sons of Anu. And Anu, so in the Babylonian pantheon, this is very interesting. You have the Ea, who is the god of gods, the king of kings, who has a firstborn son in whom he invests all the authority of the kingdom, gives power of judgment, and his firstborn son redeems the Igigi, which is the Sumerian word for the children of heaven, essentially. They were lesser beings. And then Ea had a father whose name was Anu. And so the Anunnaki were the sons of Anu. In other words, they were the sons of God. When you look at how this is the Anunnaki is translated in Genesis chapter 6, it doesn't use the Sumerian word Anunnaki. It translates it as sons of God. But it means exactly the same thing. Now, you mentioned Zechariah Stitchins. He is a controversial figure. He's very prominent in some of the New Age beliefs. None of his translations can really be
Verified, right?
replicated by any Sumerian linguist. He basically was producing ideas and theories that are at odds with traditional translations of these ancient texts. So when we talk about Stitchins, he basically comes up with...
It almost sounded science fiction. Like when I read it,
It is. In my opinion, that's exactly what it is.
and I'm like, okay, I see the Enlil, Enki, Jesus say, like I saw some parallels, but then I also saw like Star Wars in there all at the same time. You know what I mean? And so, but it was still interesting to read. You've got this guy, I don't know, Billy Carson. Do you know who Billy Carson is or of him?
The comedian?
No, Forbidden Knowledge. He's a
No.
Sumerian tablet researcher guy.
Is he like an ancient astronauts guy?
Yes.
Yeah, no. I honestly haven't listened to those guys, so I don't know what they got.
So getting back, so you've got that in the Book of Enoch, and then this is what I have felt like. If you want to know about our history that's not available, like just go to the Book of Enoch. There's information in there. But I want you to tell us a little bit about the Watchers.
Yeah.
Kind of, because there's not a lot of information in the Bible about that, but there's a lot of information in the Book of Enoch about that, and it helps one better understand why the need for the flood.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, the Book of Enoch is often called the Book of.
Oh, go.
I got something. We need to start announcing our next 100 days, our contests that we're doing.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we are rolling out something fun to get our community involved, and we are going to be giving away $1,000 American, clarify, $1,000 cash to the Zion Media fan subscriber that recommends the best guest. You know, like a future Lance, a future Alex Boyer. We're looking for somebody that is, you know, faith-based, or they could be a sports figure, politics, culture, anyone that you guys think, I want that person on Zion Media. Or if you're watching this yourself and you're being like, I want to be on Zion Media, you could win yourself $1,000. What we're going to do is, over the next 100 days, we are going to open up our link tree, and there's going to be a Google form if you go in there, and it's going to be a place where you can click on it. You can go in there and fill out your information. You can fill out information on who the guest is, why you think they would be a great guest for Zion Media. And then we want you to either take out your phone and record yourself and give us a little explanation of why this person would be perfect for Zion Media as a guest, or do an audio that we don't need a video, but we just want to hear it more. You know, it's a lot easier to perceive what your intention is versus just clickety-clicking on that. So how it's going to work is we're going to filter those in. We're going to go through them, scrub them, the ones that we like. We're going to reach out, contact, do a little pre-interview, see if they're podcast worthy, and then we're going to platform them. We're going to put them on the show. And as we put these on, once we get 2 or 3 people on, we're going to open our socials up for voting, where you as the fans are going to help us determine who is the best guest. Over the course of the 100 days, whoever is voted in as the best guest, it's kind of a 50-50 criteria. We believe it. And then the votes will determine who the winner is for the $1,000. And 100 days from now, before December 21st, we're going to get that $1,000 out. Someone will have some Christmas spending cash or some personal cash. So
Trevor, quick question. If I recommend, you guys should have Sylvester Stallone on your program, they need to introduce us to Sylvester Stallone.
You got to be able to
just recommend somebody, and then it's like, not only do you recommend either yourself or somebody else, you got to bring them to the table.
Yep, you got to be the connector in chief.
If they know Tucker Carlson, or someone big, or like Elon Musk, they'd have to give us their number. Right.
Well, not only just give us their number, we don't want to call and be like, hey, David gave me your number. They need to make the connection. They need to help platform them.
Put us on a text thread. Put us on an email thread. You've got to be the connector in order to qualify.
Exactly.